Brethren and
sister, what the hell?
brethren, hey, screwheads, listen up. Before we begin, it's time to discuss ongoing business.
Before we begin what comes before we begin, we have to address the snack treats situation.
Snacks, yes.
Serious, yes. I'm
Mm.
fucking hungry. man.
Absolute
I wanna get a
snacks.
bite.
We need
Before we
snacks.
begin what precedes what begins, that which comes before we begin, we have to consider the drink selection.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
A drink,
Yes,
right?
you-
drink
Yeah.
You guys are my vodka.
Have to have something.
Well,
It's just absolutely-
before we begin, what precedes what begins, prior to that which precedes what begins, that antecedents, we could stop to consider the powder selection. Yeah?
Oh, come on. Unbelievable. This guy.
Come on.
That's what I'm
Hey,
talking
quiet
about.
you.
All right.
Quite, hey, it's time for other business. The hazardous materials vault has been resealed, and I've stuck that weird time map in there.
Is someone watching over it?
Oh, yes. Top men.
Ooh, what men are these?
Top men.
All these tops and not a single bottom. Huh.
Okay, so what's next?
Item 2. We're gonna need men. Of the top variety.
Phrasing.
Seriously, all I got down there is Brother Methuselah and a broom, and the broom technically outranks him.
Oh, that guy again. Jeez.
It's going to happen over here.
Hey, here's a point of order. What about my goddamn shop? It's a disaster area. I demand compensation.
If you're referring to Operation Someone Else's Problem, it was a complete success.
Yeah, it's my problem. And that makes me your problem until it's fixed.
You know, I heard the chumps have formed a literary discussion circle, but I guess that's someone else's problem.
Hey!
Well, we could just take some money out of the ludicrously overblown bug powder budget.
Hey!
This is not other business. It's not on my other business list. This is unauthorized additional business. I promise we'll deal with it later.
Fine.
Okay, so what is tonight's movie?
I guess we forgot to pick one.
I have a little-known experimental psychodrama from...
No! Wait, you guys really just watch movies?
Weren't you paying attention? You read the word film like 5 times.
Yeah, no. I wasn't paying attention at all. And I kind of thought you were all like LARPing or something.
We don't just watch movies. Tell her.
Tell me what? Should I be worried?
We watch terrible and weird movies and decide if they're gonna make people start to...
Everybody knows the terrible and highly specific symptoms of cinemania. There's no point going over it again.
But what is cinema?
Moving on.
I still don't.
Moving on.
We watch them, we scrutinize them, we stick them in the vault.
So, like a Mystery Science Theater meets Siskel and Ebert kind of deal?
More like the Legion of Doom meets the Onion AV Club, but basically, yeah.
Huh. And all this time, I figured it was just a shuttered, lackluster video.
Oh, wow. There hasn't been a lackluster video since 1998.
Well, actually, it was Front Row Video first before Lackluster bought them out, and then the chain went bankrupt after a series of scandals involving the FBI and an international nuclear arms dealing ring.
I really don't care. So, let's watch a movie. That sounds fun. I've got time to kill until my store gets repaired, I guess. So, who runs this whole deal? Do you follow some sort of ancient prophecy or something? Ooh, is there a chosen one?
Well, we like fezzes.
And mind-enhancing, entirely medicinal substances.
Our duties are many, our responsibilities dire, our reach is infinite, and our punctuality is pretty good. Right, Andre?
Yeah. Basically, we all throw out suggestions and end up watching whichever one we can find a tape of.
Well, I think I have an old VHS of The Hunger in my bag. Oh, here it is. Want to watch this?
I don't know.
You usually have
I
to
don't know.
ponder on this for at least a
David Bowie
week
in it?
beforehand. I mean,
Do you have a better selection?
Oh, well, interloper, since you already have it handy, I guess we can watch it. Are you prepared to be Pontifex of Presentment?
Pointy who, the what now?
It means the person who picked the movie.
Oh, yeah, I guess. What do I need to do?
I mean, well, you've already provided the sacred scroll.
He means the VHS.
Are you prepared to summarize the film?
Sure. David Bowie is a vampire. Sexy vampire shenanigans ensue.
Yeah, we're gonna need a little more than that.
I'll fill in the gaps as we go along.
Fine, but you have to bring your own fez.
Will a mysterious cloak do? I already lined the hood with foil.
I like this one. She can stay.
Within the depths of the strip mall of the damned, this is the TPD shopping plaza, guys, lies the decrepit video store long since shuttered. Well, that part's true.
Just read the script, please.
Past the dusty shelves, empty save for spiders spinning their patient webs, and weirdos spinning their crazy conspiracy theories. Beyond the ancient batwing doors, guarding the sepulchre where once were hidden the perverse and heretical, aka the old porno section, a secret society assembles. You're only secret because you never go outside.
Stick to the script.
To scrutinize those films which are rumored to drive viewers to madness and disillusion. We'll see about that. Draw closer, dear listener. I don't think anyone's actually listening to this. Let your trembling ears sup upon the eldritch knowledge, crazy rantings, of the Cinemania Society. Y'all take yourself way too seriously.
We the brethren of what's called the judges offering cinema, the art scene.
Movies and shit. Where's that paper? Oh yeah. All right. Welcome, brethren and sister. Wait, isn't a cistern something for catching rainwater?
Just read what's on the goddamn paper.
Fine. Welcome, brethren and cistern, to this conclave of the Cinemania Society. Please be seated, lords. And welcome to our listeners, if you exist, to whom I will now issue this warning. We, the disciples of the Cinemania, have studied the mysteries of... No, I'm not reading this. Listen, we're going to use salty language. A lot of it. We're also going to talk about things that aren't for kids. If you can't handle any of that for some reason, or if you are a kid yourself, and seriously, where the fuck are your parents? How'd you get a hold of this podcast if you're a kid? Anyways, you're probably better off listening to a different podcast. Got it? Okay. Let's see who's here. I'm guessing you don't want to call me Doña Esperanza Servando Georgina Zamora de la Rosa de Ruiz Bravo all the time.
Oh, we can't just call you Hope.
Why not?
It doesn't fit with our aesthetic. It's not very ominous, is it?
And what aesthetic is that, exactly?
I am Sinquisitor Ethan, keeper of the lenses.
I don't see any lenses. What the fuck is this Inquisitor?
Profligator Daniel, possessor of the word.
How do you possess the word?
Scrutinizer Zachariah here, guardian of the door.
Oh yeah, you're doing a real good job with that door, buddy.
Hey,
Repositor Andre, voice from the outer world.
Does that mean he's literally phoning it in?
Professor Andrea, scholar of San Francisco.
Token girl. Got it.
Verifier Andy, Master Illuminator.
Andre, Andrea, and Andy. No way that's gonna get confusing.
And I am...
Shut up.
I had a bookstore. So how about keeper of the books? And you can call me Auntie Hope. That's what the kids call me when I teach my dark arts and crafts class, which I now have to cancel. Gotta remember to make some calls.
oh, keeper of the books. Does that mean you can take a look at our budget? Listen, I'm going to need some men.
Keeper of the books, not bookkeeper.
What's the difference?
Oh, it's the difference between working in a zoo and just having an elephant in your lounge that you don't talk about.
I'm Auntie Hope, keeper of the books. I will be serving as a, what you call it again?
Pontifex of presentment.
Right. Pontifex of presentment for tonight's movie.
Subject of scrutiny.
Sorry. Subject of scrutiny. The Hunger, a film from 1983 directed by Tony Scott, who went on to create the kinds of things you think of when someone says they had a sack of cocaine and a movie camera and made magic with hookers. Scrutinizer Zachariah will act as master castigator for this conclave. Scrutinizer Zachariah, present the charges.
All right. Number 1, belief that chain smoking is a substitute for personality. 2, not letting David fucking Bowie do a theme tune. 3, abuse of a random underbridge roller disco flash dancing dude. Massive overuse of moody lighting. C, massive overuse of flappy gauze drapes. Item 6, extending the suspension of disbelief that many doves can be in a one room, one speck of bird shit, describing your makeup effects as illusions. Inspiring a generation to wear round sunglasses at night. Guilty. Only David Bowie can do that. And turning Susan Sarandon into the most iconic bisexual since Susan Sarandon in Rocky Horror Picture Show. Or even Susan Sarandon in Thelma and Louise. Serious trigger warnings. Blood, sexual content, violence, like a lot of all of those.
Thank you, Scrutinizer Zachariah. To read the first section of our summary of The Hunger, it's Inquisitor Ethan.
Okay, The Hunger. We open on a dimly lit scene. Robert Smith of The Cure is dancing behind a wire fence, and the very first thing everybody surely must be thinking is, where's Bela Lugosi? You know, we all totally want to see him alive and kicking in a vampire movie, and gosh, I sure hope he is alive.
That guy isn't Robert Smith. The band isn't The Cure. It's someone even cooler. That's Peter fucking Murphy, and the band is fucking Bauhaus. Robert Smith had been more commercially popular, but he was the Kirkland signature to Peter Murphy. A couple fun notes about Peter Murphy. Murphy was also notably the original casting choice for Fletcher Christian in Tony Scott's big brother Ridley Scott's 1984 film, The Bounty. This means that the Brother Scotts have recognized the majesty of the godfather of goth. Unfortunately for the world, however, Peter Murphy lost out to Mel Gibson, who ended up playing Mr. Christian opposite Anthony Hopkins as Captain Bligh. Such a shame. Oh yeah, Neil Gaiman confirms that Murphy was the original model for Dream, the lead character in his landmark comic Sandman. Now, completely badass, awesome series on Netflix. Seriously, if you haven't seen it, do see it. Anyhow, you were saying?
Wow.
Okay, so Peter Murphy. I take it back. Anyway, Bela Lugosi Dead by Bauhaus blares in the background, making sure we know damned well that someone here is undead. The scene pulls out to reveal a warehouse party that looks like someone cleared out the 80s themed section of a Halloween store and threw everything into a horde of early 80s music video background dancers. In the most unrealistic scene we're going to have in this movie, people are dancing excitedly to Bauhaus.
This is pre-Spirit's Halloween store, by the way. Pre-Spirit.
We see the dancers reflected in some very cool sunglasses that are gradually revealed to be worn by David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve. So we know they're sexy and awesome because they're wearing their sunglasses at night, indoors, while smoking. Now, they're already smoking, and now they're also smoking while smoking, if you know what I mean. Bowie and Deneuve are here looking hungry, and they've come for takeout. And that's what they do. They pick up a couple they like out of all the young dudes.
Would you say that they are hungry like the wolf?
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, no. We're not even getting close to the whole neuromantics and Duran Duran synthwave stuff yet. We're deep in the early 80s now.
Right.
Okay, so we cut to their dark, chic, very 80s apartment straight out of Miami Vice because they're dark, chic, very 80s swingers. They've each brought home their conquests who proceed to dance in front of an old-school projector because this will be one of those artsy, high-class orgies. The hosts divide and conquer, Bowie luring his lady friend into the kitchen by seductively tapping the empty ice bucket. No ice, he says in that sexy way which makes you think he wants your cubes. Honestly, Bowie can do just about anything seductively. Hot and heavy make-out sessions begin, but they consist mostly of a sort of angry licking, until Bowie and Deneuve pull out their tiny necklace daggers, trademark, and slice open some necks. This is modern love, I guess. The scene cuts back and forth between vampires and a video feed of 2 monkeys in a cage. They never say the word vampire, but if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and drinks the blood of its victims like a duck, then it sounds like you got yourself a duckula. God. As the vampires feed on their victims, one monkey goes absolutely ape shit and eats the other. Maybe this is Tony Scott.
It's a monkey, not an ape.
Yes, that's true. And if you can't remember, there's an easy rhyme that I can teach you to tell the difference. Monkeys have tails, apes don't.
That didn't rhyme.
That doesn't rhyme, Dave.
That's why you can remember it. Okay. Anyway, maybe this is Tony Scott making a point about something monkeys. Fuck, I don't know. I mean, everybody was on cocaine. It was the early 80s. Jesus Christ. After their dinner, Bowie and Deneuve get in the shower to wash off all their sins and promise each other forever. It's only forever. Not long at all.
Didn't we have an agreement that you wouldn't sing?
Oh, God.
So there's 4 of them when they're all making out. Does that technically make it an orgy? Because I would think that would be like, a 2-couple thing. How many people, though, you need before it's technically an orgy?
And they divided and conquered. 2 were in the kitchen and 2 were in the living room. So it wasn't.
Isn't that just a swap?
I would say by the technical definition, this is not an orgy.
Yeah.
I thought an orgy was 5 or more.
5 or more.
I thought it was 4 or more.
I don't know. Should we consult Wikipedia?
I don't know. We need like I think it would have to be an odd number. Is technically what makes it.
It's not really an orgy unless there's one person on their own in the corner feeling guilty and unable to really take part. I'm just wondering what the hell they're doing here.
You seem to be speaking.
Well, that certainly wouldn't be Bowie or
experience.
Deneuve. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I was right. According to orgy etiquette, you need 4 or more people.
4 or more. Okay.
There you go.
Where do you find this etiquette? Is there a book? Do you write to Dear Prudence?
It just makes me think of that bit from Key and Peele. Just pop, man.
Wow, I really regret bringing that up.
Forever? Eternal youth, by drinking the blood of the young. I see. I just need to, attend to something over here.
Did someone hear something?
Someone better check on the old ball sack. Might break a hip or something.
Well, volunteer. Thank you for your service.
All right. Hey, VM, are you down here? Told you not to go wandering off. There is some bad shit stored away under this place.
Cool.
Indeed.
Wait, what? Hey, stop that! What is that, a tiny knife?
Behold,
Dude, seriously?
I stab you again.
Dude, I'm standing over here. Look, this is just embarrassing for both of us. You know you're attacking a mob, right?
Wait, what?
Are you seriously wearing the stupid round sunglasses down here? What is that, black nail polish? What is wrong with you?
Oh, well, I was going for a look, you see, and I thought it was quite fetching.
Well, while you're down here, can you just fetch some snacks, like pickles or kumquats or something? All right. Jesus, what a night.
Oh, confound it all. I thought I looked quite the funky, fresh night stalker.
Hey, guys. You know, this movie really kind of kicked off the whole 80s goth vampire look, didn't it? Goth really started as a post-punk movement. It was tracked down by people who were really into bands like the Velvet Underground and Joy Division, which really got their goth sound. And the whole style of goth really came the first bands like Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees and The Cure got started. You have a lot of people taking their styles from Susie Sue and David Bowie and then going back into more of a Victorian Elizabethan style as opposed to like the more dark kind of punky Sid Vicious look, but then you get, Robert Smith and people taking looks from Bela Lugosi and, the Addams Family and Betty Page. And one of my favorite guys is this keyboardist called Johnny Slut, who and it all really started in this club which had a goth night that was called the Bat Cave in Soho in the early 80s, which literally had the Halloween rubber bats hanging from the ceiling. And
I was just going to ask you, isn't like sort of one of the big hallmarks of the goth subculture is, you might say, like alternative sexuality and alternative relationships?
Yeah, you do get that. You see, there's this whole thing in goth where you're kind of viewing yourself as the monster who is ostracized, but is still sexually alluring, which is why you get all these people even to this day saying, I just want the big titty goth girl. They don't understand really what they're going to get into, which is like a lot of very fetishy, kinky, they're going to wind up finding themselves handcuffed to something and wondering why the hell that she's putting on a strap on.
Speaking of goths, I just want to do a shout out to Nick the Goth from Trash Film Orgy. If you're listening, we're thinking about you there, buddy. Thanks for running the spanking booth all those years.
Those were good times. But going back to fashion, there's general influences of goth. You always have had this sort of horror film goth crossover, and that goes back to places like the Batcave and taking from early Edgar Allan Poe and that feeling of moroseness and the acceptance that everything is sort of in decline, that things fall apart. Even if the center holds, things still fall apart.
You're saying they're basically bat hippies?
In a way, without that happiness to it. Goth is also interesting as a subculture in that it has no like particular one drug that is the defining drug for that subculture. Like,
except maybe cigarettes.
Heroin.
Cloves.
Clove cigarettes.
Clove cigarettes.
Up until this point as well, the vampire movie was played out. I mean, all through the 70s, it was all just cheesier and cheesier vampire movies, mostly either exploitation or set in Victorian times or whatever. And then you have the goth movement coming in, and suddenly it's a perfect match. Goths plus vampires. It works. And
I mean, the preceding this was all the Hammer Films stuff where they were kind of, beating the Dracula story to death.
The son of Dracula. Yeah, and also at this time you also have authors like Anne Rice started. I believe she wrote Interview with a Vampire in the mid 1970s.
Yeah, it was really
some new life, as it were, into the vampire.
It was really
tropes.
time for a new look at vampires, and definitely this movie said, hang on, we've got the goths, we've got the idea of the vampire film, which needs revitalization, brings them all together, and it's a match made in heaven.
Cut to a lab run by Susan Saran-Wrap's character, Dr. Sarah Roberts, who is the one doing weird things involving provoking monkeys, and she doesn't know what the fuck happened. Maybe they just don't like her brand of off-the-cuff observational comedy. Dr. Roberts is doing research into progeria and slowing the aging process. And if you want to have a really nightmarish time on Google, just Google progeria and go to Google Images, and you will see some shit you will never, ever, ever forget. They do show us some pictures
and
of progeria.
She mispronounces it. She says progeria. Like, you would think that Tony Scott would stop her and say, it's pronounced progeria.
Well, maybe he thought it sounded more educated that way.
Listen, when it's Susan Sarandon, she can say whatever the hell she wants, and you just have to go with it. That's the stature of this woman.
Anyway, so she's doing research into progeria, slowing the aging process, and Bowie discovers this, watching her being interviewed on TV by the world's most bland and disinterested chat show host. Bowie's TV time in the now slightly less dimly lit apartment is interrupted by a small androgynous tween with a Polaroid camera, whom we learn is named Alice, who is here for her violin lesson. And seriously, fucking boomer parents let their kids go goddamned anywhere in the 80s. No, no wonder there had to be so many PSAs in the 80s teaching kids about stranger danger, because these guys are literally people eating swinger couple, and this kid just goes over to learn violin from them. No questions there.
They seem like such a nice guy.
I mean, it's just across the street. It's not that far. Her parents can probably see her through the window.
Yeah, she's fine. Yeah, totally. No worries at all. Anyway, so Bowie, Deneuve, and the kid Wonder arrange into a classical trio in front of a large bay window with copious amounts of gauzy curtains waving around. Well, I suppose if you're going to play a violin for David Bowie in the 80s, you can be damn sure there will be gauzy drapes everywhere. Naturally,
and this is not the last we're going to see of those gauzy drapes. They are fucking everywhere for the rest of this film.
Oh, yeah. Naturally, Bowie plays the cello, the sexiest of all instruments, except for the French horn, while Deneuve plays the piano, and we see flashbacks of them playing the same instruments in 18th century France, or possibly England. One way or the other, we're pretty sure it's the 18th century, because suddenly, for some reason, Bowie and Deneuve are wearing clothing that roughly approximates the 18th century, and we see Bowie has a little ponytail.
Oh, well, if he has a ponytail, it must be a different decade.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That must have been before they got good at playing, when they were absolute beginners.
The flashbacks either take place in the distant past or a little later on in the 80s.
Well, he's playing the cello. There's always room for cello.
Well, he was going to start running up that hill.
One time when I was in college, I was walking past one of the music buildings, and I heard someone practicing their cello, and it was just so beautiful and so sexy sounding, and I wanted to go up and see who it was. And I didn't have the courage. So even now, like 15, almost 20 years later, I still think of that. Like, what if I'd gone up and seen who was playing this cello, who was playing this super sexy instrument? It's still, it lives rent-free in my mind.
Probably just some random person for whom God made up for lack of chin by giving them extra Adam's apple. Hey, you want to hear me play my cello? Hey, come on up here. I'm going to fiddle on this thing for you.
Or even worse.
Or maybe a really sexy woman like Catherine Deneuve. I don't know. Maybe she plays the cello too. I wish I'd gone up and seen who was playing that cello.
Hold on. I just remembered, speaking of Susan Sarandon, wasn't she also in The Witches of Eastwick? And didn't she didn't she play a cello in that? And there was the whole scene of him spreading her legs and rolling up her skirt, and you think he's going to do something to her, and he puts the cello in between her legs. I don't know if it was her, but that was an awesome scene.
All right, let's bringing it all back in to Susan Sarandon's totally legit monkey lab. We see Sarandon's co-worker, whom I shall call Dr. Snoop L. Jackson, because he's just so laid back and cool, like most scientists, explaining that there is a connection between a person's blood type and how much they sleep, which in turn affects how quickly you age. Basically, when you stop sleeping, you die. And I can confirm this. That's a real thing. If you do stop sleeping, you do eventually die. And medical science basically considers anything more than 72 hours without sleep to be pretty dangerous, medically speaking.
And anyway. Doesn't the Geneva Convention consider that to be torture?
Yeah. Sleep deprivation is considered to be a method of torture for real.
Sadly, the Geneva Convention never did apply to monkeys.
Basically, when you stop sleeping, you die, but right before you die, you turn into scary monsters and super creeps, which we later learn is what caused the monkey to go off the deep end and eat his buddy. Through the medium of flashbacks, we get the idea that our two hungry hipsters have been doing this for a long time. However, Bowie confronts Deneuve, and actually we learn later that they are named John and Miriam, but honestly, who cares? And accuses her of wanting Alice to be next. We don't yet know next what, but it's clear that Bowie obviously feels pretty betrayed. And he also mentions not sleeping lately. It's confusing. He seems like he's surprised that he's not going to live forever, but then he asks Miriam how long the others took, so obviously we know something was up. Miriam just wants to enjoy the time they have, those golden years.
Wop, wop, wop.
Bowie puts on his best going outside clothes because some people actually can pull off a fedora and trench coat combo, and heads down to Sarandon's lab, which is conveniently within walking distance of his apartment.
He looks like Dick Tracy in this bit.
He kind of does, but oddly, yes, he's one of those few people who can pull off the trench coat and fedora combo without looking like, a libertarian about to go into a rant about why the age of consent should be lowered just before he shows you his collection of gas station katanas.
I think that he could even get away with saying "milady" in that outfit.
I was just gonna say.
No
he
one.
looks like a
I'm gonna
redhead.
tell you, as a woman, no one can get away with saying "milady." No one.
Unless it's David Bowie.
Nope, not even David Bowie.
Also, just a quick note, I want to shout out to Robert Evans for giving me that bit, which I totally ripped off from him. So thank you, Robert. Anyway, so he tries to
While
explain
you were
to...
enjoying my Berlin period, I was studying the blade.
Yes.
He tries to explain to her that he's starting to age rapidly, but she has a meeting to get to right now. And he gets extra creepy and screams, "I am a young man! A young man!" Which is totally a thing that young men do. Totally stable young men, mentally stable.
Screaming about your sanity or something we've seen again and again in these movies is a great way to prove your sanity.
Prove the point that you are completely sane, indeed.
Worked for Sam Neill.
Worked for Sam Neill. It worked for Alan Bates. It's a recurring theme. But okay, so Sarandon gently escorts Bowie to a waiting room, promises to be back in 15 minutes, and promptly alerts security as soon as she's out of sight, which is not a bad idea, actually. Sarandon is in her obviously not 15-minute long meeting and gets down to some serious monkey business. She checks a video feed of the crazy-ass monkey that shows that after he gets done eating his buddy, he begins to age super rapidly to the point that he decomposes in a matter of minutes. Like, this is actually quite an enjoyable piece of stop-motion animation that they do here, and probably ate up a good chunk of the film's budget.
You have a very different definition of enjoyable than I do.
Well, it's at least reminiscent of the rapid decomposition scene in Evil Dead, which they did on a whole lot less budget. But anyway, ashes to ashes indeed, which this does not bode well. This is something I would say is more even than foreshadowing, and probably close to more like 5 shadowing.
Maybe even 6 shadowing.
Dun, dun, dun. 2 hours later, Bowie finally gives up waiting and then sees Sarandon in the stairwell on his way out. She had dismissed him as a crackpot. Who wouldn't? But she can see that he has obviously aged in the 2 hours since she saw him last, transforming completely into old Bowie. Which is, it's actually a pretty cool little sequence of him waiting and aging as he waits, and that nobody in the waiting room remarks on whatsoever. Look, if I was sitting next to a dude and he aged that fucking rapidly while I was waiting, I would probably be a little disconcerted and notify the medical people right away to do something. But you know,
it's the 80s. No one paid attention to anything. They were all just so high they didn't care.
Everybody was too self-absorbed.
And if you're willing to willingly enter a waiting room in a crazy monkey clinic, you got to expect some weird shit.
True. Yeah.
Granted, everyone was just staring at their phones, right?
Now Sarandon is thoroughly intrigued, and she tries to apologize and get him to stay, but he is pissed off and wants nothing more to do with her. He yells at her with all of the old man rage and spittle he can muster before storming out. Maybe he's just afraid of Americans. On his way home, old Bowie impotently attacks a solar roller disco enthusiast trying to have a perfectly innocent flash dance moment under a bridge, but his tiny necklace dagger, trademark, misses its mark. Old Bowie just doesn't have the gumption to take down an 80s roller skating bridge person anymore, and that's just sad. It's hard going through changes.
No, you're on notice. You're
Turn
on notice.
and face the strange.
Nope. We're not doing this. We're not doing this.
Oh, all right. Dejected and still possessed by the hunger, he comes home. No one knows where Deneuve is, but old Bowie is home alone until Alice comes by. Well, maybe just a little snack, right? Maybe just a smidge of a young American to take the edge off.
Who's ready for snacks?
Ooh, snacks.
All
All right.
Okay.
Kumquats?
Yeah.
Pickled kumquats. What the fuck?
Hey.
I just need someone to help me with the biscuits. Yes, the heavy biscuits.
What are you talking about?
Seriously, this guy?
I think I pulled a ligament, you see. So if one of you would be so good as to lend a hand.
Pulled more than a ligament. Fine. Anything to get this over with. Come on. Is this even the way to the biscuit vault?
This is the way to death.
I'm sorry, are you trying to do something to me? Well, you know, this reminds me. Wasn't there a serial killer who used to pretend to have a broken arm and get people to help him carry stuff?
Yes, Ted Bundy, you fool.
Yes, that's right. Hey, you reminded me of something. Thank you. Don't forget the biscuits. I'll see you in a few moments.
Oh, Bundy!
Hey, I just thought of something. This whole thing with Bowie trying to stalk and kill people has a total serial killer vibe. And like Deneuve and Bowie are shown as being the ultimate swinger serial killer couple, which actually sounds kind of phony, right? Well, actually, as it turns out, there was a real serial killer swinging couple. You guys ever heard of Gerald and Charlene Gallego? I think it's probably Gallego.
I have not.
Yeah, Gallego.
No.
Don't think so.
I'm sure it's pronounced Gallego, but because it was Sacramento in the late 70s, people
Anglicized, yeah. No, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm just going to say Gallego because I think that's how he said it. But honestly, I don't give a fuck how this guy said it because he was a serial killer and he was an asshole. But I'll say Gallego because I think that's how people knew him. Anyway,
a serial killing couple that swings in the 1970s. Why am I not surprised?
Well, no, it's actually quite rare because even back then, because this was the heyday of serial killers, like right, everybody was focused on it after the Zodiac killer. I mean, there were serial killers who preceded them, but the 60s and 70s were pretty heavy. There were a lot of serial killers in operation, and there are not that many swinger couples, and it made international press. So, one of the things about Gerald and Charlene Gallego was that they would kidnap young women and as sex slaves and then abuse them and then murder them. And this was going on between 1978 and 1980. And in fact, one of the places where they picked up victims was at the Sail Inn on Jefferson Boulevard that I live like maybe a half a mile away from at best. I passed by it when we were moving into the place where I live. My dad points it out. He's like, "Hey, that's the Sail Inn." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Yeah, do you know that that's where a serial killer couple used to hunt?" I was like, "What?"
Dang.
So,
I mean, if you give your business such a terrible pun of a name as the Sail Inn, you're kind of asking for it.
Yeah. Well, there was another thing that happened too, which I think this may have. I think the Gallegos may have been, and one of the other funny things about Gerald Gallego, which honestly, this guy really should have just been a goth instead of a murderer, because he was married 7 times, including twice to the same woman. Then married.
Always a good sign of a stable relationship.
Yeah.
She didn't learn her lesson at all, did she?
Well, Charlene, his partner in crime, was actually from Stockton.
It all makes sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, he was still married to a previous wife when he married Charlene. So this guy is he was a
bigamist.
Bigamist, bigger than me at least.
Idiot. That's the word. Idiot.
Yeah, idiot. But he had been arrested 23 times and had been convicted of robbery.
That's a prime number.
Yeah, he had served prison time and had been arrested 23 times. But yeah, they are known for kidnapping usually like 2 girls at a time. There were about 10 victims when they were captured.
Oh man!
Finally got captured. But yeah, they were all over Sacramento in the late 70s and early 80s. And one of the other notable serial killers of the era was Richard Chase, also known as the Vampire of Sacramento, because he was known for drinking his victims' blood and cannibalizing them.
Oh,
he lived over.
God, Sacramento was pretty shitty in the 70s and 80s, wasn't it?
No. I'll explain why that was the case. But I think I don't know.
But did it really get any better?
Well, I was hoping we would get an interview with Whitley Strieber for this, but we didn't. I wanted to ask him specifically, were these people who were inspiring you to write this novel that got adapted into this movie? Because, I mean, these people were like Richard Chase, the Vampire of Sacramento, and the Gallego swinger serial killers were operating around the same time, like between 1977 and 1980. So Richard Chase killed 6 people between 77 and 78, and then right after that were the Gallegos doing their things where they got 10 people. The sad thing about Richard Chase, though, is he was a very, very sick person. Like he wasn't just like a sociopath who, you know, got off on murdering people like the Gallegos did. This was somebody who was like seriously like a schizophrenic, like had and then got fixated on blood and
like
institutionalized.
Like Nicolas Cage's character in that one vampire movie. Yes, the great Nicolas Cage vampire film, Con Air.
You hadn't said vampire yet. I was just fixing.
But yeah, wasn't there that Nicolas Cage film where he thinks he's a vampire?
Vampire's Kiss?
Yes, The Vampire's Kiss.
But yeah, no, sadly, like Richard Chase is a very sick person. But to what Hope was saying, though, about like Sacramento being a terrible place, any city was a terrible place in that time. And this is why. Has anybody heard of lead crime theory?
Yes, I've heard of that.
The lead paint.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't lead paint. It was tetraethyl lead as a gasoline additive.
Mm-hmm.
This was added in the 1920s.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the things, and I have to say, you know, this was actually Mother Jones magazine who broke this story. Kevin Drum, who did just a groundbreaking piece of research journalism in 2013 when he did a massive comparison of violent crime rates with lead emissions. And he was found that rates of violent crime rose as lead vapor air pollution rose, with about a 20-year lead time. So as people were increasingly exposed to lead, 20 years later, violent crime rates were equivalently higher. Like,
I was gonna say, because like in the same area too, at the same time, you had the trailside killers down in like the Santa Cruz Mountains too, who were operating.
Yeah,
it's not all bad news, though. I mean, those car engines were running sweet.
Oh, yeah.
This is insane. Who let them put lead in gasoline to begin with? Like, what was the point? Why did they even want it in there?
Oh, there's a whole thing about that.
Yeah.
It caused less efficient engines to be able to run better, basically.
So they could use shittier gasoline and add this as an additive so that it wouldn't cause engine knock. So it was all an industry thing. Engines didn't have to be made with as much precision, so that, you know, the car industry could half-ass building the engines, and the oil industry didn't have to refine their oil as intensely. They could just use shitty oil and shitty engines and add this anti-knock compound of tetraethyl lead, and everybody could get around just fine. But what was really fascinating about the research that I was trying to get to is the fact that not only were they able to show that the violent crime rose with exposure to lead, but after leaded gasoline was abolished in a given country, violent crime rates consequently lowered. And it was shown not just from the macro level, where you could look at the crime rate nationally, but you could take it all the way down from the national to the state to the county to the city and even to the neighborhood level, where they saw them. Yeah, and it was shown from country to country, and the graphs were almost exactly the same, based on when a given country abolished leaded gasoline. So it was really, really phenomenal reporting. So shout out to Mother Jones magazine, and it's interesting. So if you're into that shit, you should read about it.
Man, we are just like a regular connections here. I mean, going from the hunger to goth to vampires to serial killers to engine knock to climate change to the birth of the universe.
Now let's just see if we can get James Burke out here, huh?
Yeah, we are some smart motherfuckers.
We have no boundaries. We are infinite.
And you Hope, just say, we just review movies. This is what we do. This is how we stop Cinemania.
Well, this is also something where we can say, Andre, you guys in Gen Z have it a lot better than we had it, because you didn't have to grow up with all the lead contamination.
Yeah, we kind of have that as a bit of a meme about your generation and the previous generation having bad takes on the internet. We just comment lead poisoning and kind of leave it at that.
Well, okay.
Your prize is you get to live. That's also your punishment.
All right, that was enough of a snack break, guys. Everybody got their drinks topped off? All right, let's bring it back in.
Completely chill with the weird old guy hungrily eyeing her, Alice asks if he is John's father, while she's just sort of wandering around the place looking at things and taking the occasional Polaroid. She had planned to just leave a note for Miriam, but she has her violin with her and tells old Bowie about a piece she's been working on. He asks her to play for him and she obliges because this is the 80s and stranger danger isn't a thing yet, at least for big city latchkey kids, so she thinks
Can
nothing
confirm.
of...
Can
jeez.
confirm.
Throwback. So she thinks nothing of hanging out alone in an adult's apartment with another adult she doesn't know. As
Absolutely can confirm. That was a thing that happened in the early 80s. They had to run all those PSAs back when I was a kid about this is why you don't go with strangers and do stuff.
Otherwise, you end up in this movie, I guess. Watch out, there could be vampires.
Yet more allegory from this film.
Oh yeah. As Alice plays, old Bowie is overcome with the hunger. He busts out his tiny necklace dagger TM and attacks Alice from behind. Somehow Alice is still wearing her Polaroid camera around her neck while playing violin, and she snaps a picture on her way down. The Polaroid photo falls dramatically to the floor while old Bowie feeds on Alice in the background. All she ever wanted was to hang around while she was waiting for the man. Later, Miriam returns home and old Bowie confronts her. It's clear that he hasn't got long left. "You said forever," he repeats with obvious betrayal in his voice. They have flashbacks to 18th century France. Presumably we're meant to think that this is where they met. But this time old Bowie chose to look back in anger. He confronts his lover in all his wrinkly glory and demands, "Kiss me." Miriam.
Kiss me. Brother Methuselah, you need to go sit down and cool off.
Getting a little antsy over there. Miriam pushes through her obvious revulsion and obliges. Whether this was Miriam's disgust for John or genuine disgust on the part of Deneuve for having to make skin contact with those heavy prosthetics, makeup illusions, is anyone's guess. Miriam finally notices the body-sized blood stain on the floor, which she had previously overlooked.
I guess she wasn't hungry?
No, well, maybe. She shouldn't have
you
looked.
wouldn't catch people licking gravy up off the floor, right? I mean, if you see a giant pool of gravy on the floor, it's not like you're just gonna, unless you're really starving. But anyway, go ahead.
Now I'm just picturing that, and that's burned into my brain forever. She shouldn't have looked at the carpet. He's done something awful on it. She sees the
nose with a rolled up newspaper.
Yeah, right. She sees the Polaroid in the grisly puddle that used to be a tween and makes the connection with Alice. She turns to John and asks/accuses him, "What did you do?" John begs her, "Give me a little longer," and collapses. Miriam says she can't, so John begs instead for death, and Miriam replies again, "I can't." He's really making her feel under pressure.
Dun 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 dun. Actually, quick side note. In the book, the reason why she's so pissed off about this is because Alice was supposed to have been Bowie's replacement. She knew this was coming, and they were, much as I hate to use this term in the charged times in which we live, but this would have been a completely accurate term given what they were doing, grooming of Alice.
Miriam carries Alice's body to the incinerator in the basement, and oh yeah, it turns out they have a massive human body-sized incinerator right there in the basement, because of course they do. To be fair, on Gen Z in the before times, these were fairly common in older buildings. They are for burning trash, and for heating the building in the times when nobody gave a fuck about carbon footprints.
Yeah, no, that's not a joke. They used to heat the building by burning garbage. And we wonder why now suddenly the whole planet is on fire.
Like, isn't that also just carbon monoxide poisoning too?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, like we're still not that far removed from the pea soup fog days of jolly old London when they burned rocks to heat their homes, and and people died from all the sulfuric acid that the fog would turn into from all the coal emissions from everybody's house.
Oh my
and then
God.
so, even in the late 70s, early 80s, they still had incinerators in buildings where they would burn trash. You'd had a chute in your apartment, you'd dump all the shit down the chute, and they would just go to the incinerator and burn, 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 burn.
Anyway, somehow no one has noticed the copious amount of bodies that this couple carries into their basement. By the time Miriam returns, old Bowie is completely decrepit, so she cradles him in her arms and carries him away. Just picks him up like a cloth sack full of sexy boomerangs. He tries to say something about it, and she's all like, "Shh, John, I'm only dancing." Next, we cut to what is presumably an attic. Miriam has somberly carted a dying ancient rock god up an entire building from basement to attic. And that's real dedication to the bit right there. Up in the dark, sinister rafters, there is a circle of light shining in from the ceiling and attracting doves, because higher-end properties don't allow pigeons. They presumably shit everywhere.
There's not a single speck of dove shit anywhere in this attic. I mean, and you have to imagine the crewmen, the film crew, like they had to be just swimming in this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Art department. All right, Dove took a dump. Go clean it.
Yep. Not going to be Grips. Not going to be Grip department. Not this time.
No, it's not G&E. That's all art department, man. That's...
Poor bastards. Deneuve parts the sea of doves. We can only assume that the lingering shadows disguise a reeking inch-deep carpet of guano, and lays old Bowie in the circle of light, surrounded by, yes, more gauzy curtains. She then puts him into a cheap wooden coffin, and it turns out that there are a lot of coffins stacked around the room. Now, from the flashbacks, we know that they didn't always live here. So at some point, they were moving house, and one wonders if Bowie made mention of the large collection of ancient funerary caskets that Miriam was bringing along. It's not like chucking an old end table in the attic because you'll find a spot for it later. Weird that she keeps her coffins in an attic instead of down in the underground.
Well, you got to keep them somewhere, Yeah.
I
mean, might as well. Again, that's where kids store their old stuffed toys when they're done with them, is in the attic, right?
Ugh. Whoever is interred in these coffins, Miriam seems to have an emotional...
He said turd.
Nice. Let's go. Whoever is interred in these coffins, Miriam seems to have an emotional connection to them. She strokes her hands over the crumbling wooden lids and asks that they be kind to him, presumably by keeping the bastard doves away or something. She calls them my loves and speaks to them in a way that makes it obvious they aren't dead. This isn't like someone talking at a headstone, but knowing it's just symbolic, she's really talking and they really hear her. A real "we are the dead" kind of vibe.
Oh, I just can't figure out what she's doing here. She says, be kind to him. How can they be kind to him? They're all boxed up like he is, too, and stuff away in the attic. What are they going to do? Use harsh language?
Yeah. They're going to use vicious mockery very aggressively.
You have a bunch of passive-aggressive vampire mummies in the attic.
All they do is just talk trash for eternity.
Oh, hold up. I need to towel up my drink. I made a themed cocktail just for this movie.
Uh-huh.
I call it a bloody old Bowie. Get it? It's got cranberry juice to give it a good bloody color, vodka to give you that fun, lightheaded blood loss feeling, and lemonade reminiscent of elderly incontinence, but no ice. You have to ask for that.
Ah, it's cool.
You people are no fun. That is quality themed cocktail action. I'll be right back.
That sounds good. Bring me one.
Got it. Yummy, yummy vodka. I'm gonna drink a lot of cranberry juice. And there's whatever. It's just garnish anyways. I got the main ingredients right here.
Want me to see me play the cello?
The second sexiest of all instruments?
I've got a French horn around here somewhere. I'm a young man. Kiss me.
Oh, I've seen this before. Did you take all your meds at once or something? How many pills did you take?
Fall under my sexy spell.
Oh, you did not just wave a gauzy carton around at me. Hey, give me that.
A cello.
And don't do it again, or I'll show you a whole new way to play the French horn.
Oh, Bowie never had to put up with this. Oh.
Guys, after this point, Bowie's basically done. He's boxed up. What do we think of him in this film?
Well, he's not bad.
I wish he was the David Bowie we know and love instead of a withered old skeleton more.
I was gonna say that, yeah.
He doesn't have the gravitas of Bowie in Labyrinth.
So, if you think of your film as like a meal, Bowie's like bacon. You don't want him as your entree. It's too much. It's overwhelming. It's overpowering. But you've got him on the side. You got him just like accenting everything else and complimenting everything else. He works great.
You're saying that Bowie is the ultimate side piece?
Yes.
A little bit of Bowie buffet, you might say.
Yes. But if you look at the movies where he's been the lead, like The Man Who Fell to Earth and The Man Who Sold the World, and well, this film, it's a lot, and they're very much sources of cinemania. But if you look at films like Zoolander, where he was just he just had a cameo, or The Prestige, where he was Nikola Tesla, he adds a little something. You know, he just kind of gives it some crunch and some salt, and he just gives it a little something. But you don't want a whole plate of them.
I did read in a later interview, he kind of got a little bit bored with the project halfway through.
As one would do with an entire plate of bacon, right? It seems exciting, and then halfway through you're like, ugh.
I mean, it's the early 80s. He had a lot going on. There was a lot on the horizon. And I think he kind of maybe went into this film and thought it'd be a quick job, and a short way into filming maybe thought, okay, I'm kind of done with this.
I think perhaps the Irish would take you to task on throwing shade on an entire plate full of bacon.
I can just see Bowie going,
look, the Irish have made some wonderful contributions to film and cuisine, haven't they?
Yes, they certainly have.
I can just see David Bowie going, look, man, gig has gone on for weeks. I've already banged everybody on the set. I'm done.
Come again?
Keeping me too long. I'm just the bacon.
But you could throw 15 minutes of Bowie into like any film, any show, and it would make it better, and it'd be great. But you go much beyond that, and it's just cloying and overwhelming.
Yeah, I can dig it.
So I think he should reserve his leading man status for music. And stick to being a side piece in films. That's my opinion.
So you're not fond of a BLT, a Bowie lettuce and tomato sandwich?
No, that would be okay.
The Bowie is nice and lean, and the tomatoes, they're just so perky.
I'm not a witch, I'm your wife.
You season that with a little Ziggy Stardust, you're perfect.
Exactly. Ziggy Stardust, not Ziggy Star like slather. Not a slab of Ziggy.
Dusting.
Just a sprinkle of booger sugar.
Exactly.
Spread some thin white Duke over the bread, and
if you want Duke on your bread, that's you, dude.
Oh boy.
While all this is going on, Susan Sarandon is trying to work out who her mystery pensioner was. She remembers John's last name and looks him up in this ancient thing called a phone book. She gets the address and heads over to...
Book. Did you get that? You actually used to be able to look up people's phone numbers in books you could find all over the city.
Jeez.
This is what you did before you had the internet. If you were a private detective, you actually had a job. Now, if you want to find somebody's phone number, you have to go pay someone. They still have them. They're still listed. You just have to go to a website and pay for it now.
Jeez. A different age. Anyway, she gets the address and heads over to apologize and pay a visit to this geriatric curiosity. Miriam eyes up the doctor in a very creepy/seductive way before telling her that John has gone to Switzerland. This is the early 80s, so that doesn't have nearly as creepy a vibe as it would now. Sarandon doesn't mind the ogle. She writes her number on a piece of paper and gives it to Deneuve before leaving.
Is this is saying that he's gone to Switzerland the vampire equivalent of telling a kid that their dog has gone to live on a farm up in the country?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah, John went to go pick up some cigarettes and he's not back yet.
But it's been 5 years.
He's still getting cigarettes. She obviously likes this couple of kooks. A walking New York stereotype comes up to Miriam and introduces himself as a detective investigating Alice's disappearance. Seriously, this guy is Discount Store Columbo.
Oh, this is Dan Hedaya. Dan Hedaya. He is the guy who plays, is it General Perez in Alien Resurrection?
Nice.
You see him here, he's very young, but he still has exactly that same look on his face, that same underbite, the same like intense eye bug that he gives everything. I mean, this guy is a fantastic character actor in everything he's in.
Love him.
Yeah.
I did like his vibe when he came in. He's just very much detective without really even introducing himself. It's great.
He's funny. Like I think this is probably the youngest I've ever seen him. I don't know if he was in anything before this, but one other note is that Dan Hedaya is connected to at least other movies of Cinemania. That classic piece of intense Cinemania, Buckaroo Banzai. He was in that next to Peter Weller playing Gomez.
He looks unwashed and somewhat slightly dazed. Miriam invites him up. The incredibly discreet maid has obviously been in because there's no blood anywhere. While talking to the detective, Miriam fiddles with the paper in her pocket, and we flash to alternating scenes of Sarandon walking and a semi-truck somehow speeding down a narrow city street. Miriam clutches the paper and seems to stop the distracted Sarandon being hit by the truck. Cut back to Miriam explaining to the detective that her necklace, which conceals her tiny necklace dagger TM, is an Ankh, an ancient Egyptian symbol for everlasting life.
And this is the reason why Goths have adopted the Ankh as their symbol. I am reasonably sure that it was this movie because the Ankhs feature so prominently.
When Sarandon returns to her office, she keeps having auditory hallucinations of the phone ringing, maybe because Miriam is fondling the scrap of paper with her phone number. No longer able to resist her curiosity, Sarandon returns to Miriam/John's apartment building. Miriam gives her a glass of port, which she promptly spills on her shirt. Oh, dearie me, would you look at that? The fairly pale-colored port instantly becomes bright blood red on Sarandon's super thin white 1980s t-shirt. Back then, you paid extra for nipple-revealing thinness. Miriam offers to find her a new shirt, provided they can do so in her dimly lit walk-in closet while Miriam sits back and watches. Don't we all keep fancy upholstered armchairs in our walk-in closets?
You don't?
No, I can't afford a walk-in closet. What do you mean? Miriam has never heard of light bulbs, but damned if every room doesn't have an antique wing-back lurking chair.
I have one of those in my living room.
Perfect. Good.
All my furniture in the living room is all Chesterfield.
Worth pointing out that Sarandon is wearing nothing up top but a thin t-shirt, even though she just came from work. Lab safety be damned. After Sarandon's one-woman wet t-shirt contest is over, Miriam decides to take her down to Suffragette City, and the two retire to the heavily mirrored bedroom for a hot and heavy makeout session on beds surrounded by even more gauzy curtains, perhaps the flappiest and gauziest we have seen so far. Considering all the candles, this place is an absolute death trap. Every moment here is a fire hazard.
Oh, this is nothing compared to the book. They had so many scenes. So many scenes. This is just like they kind of condensed them all into one great big scene. And don't get me wrong, it's a great scene.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you read that book and it's just like, dang. Anyway.
But the real star of the show is the gauzy curtains. Once I learn up on the rules for Vampire the Masquerade, I'm 100% gonna have gauzy curtains in there. Anyway, Miriam is going down on Sarandon's elbow like a phlebotomist with a job to do, and looks like she intends to lick Sarandon down to a nub. Eventually, they both drink some of each other's blood. Kinky. They roll around on the bed and make love like two erotic androids from the future who don't understand human emotion, but are willing to give this thing called love a go.
I think I need more ice.
Didn't you just grab some?
Need more. Be right back. Calm down. Calm down. Deep breaths. Think unsexy thoughts.
My proud beauty. I see you flustered with the vapors.
Ew. Yep, that'll do it.
Surrender to my mesmeric influences.
When you squint like that, it's as if the wrinkles are trying to form a message.
Fall under my spell of love.
Oh god, not the little dance too.
Behold my erotic fandango.
I'd call it harassment if it wasn't so deeply, deeply sad. Okay, let's just...
Unhand me, harridan!
We're just gonna stick you in here. And you can stay in there until you can learn to behave yourself. Wonder what all that was about. So we have a super hot scene here. Catherine Deneuve really knows how to work it. She totally owns the whole sexy seductress thing. In fact, the actress actually had a huge lesbian goth following after this film.
I wouldn't be surprised if Bowie did too after this.
Yeah, unfortunately, at the time, early in the 80s, with the AIDS crisis just starting, a lot of people weren't all that aware, but they knew that some weird disease was like striking people suddenly who had been very healthy before, and then very quickly they just wasted away, similar to kind of the way Bowie just like shrivels so quickly in the film.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's sort of almost prophetic in that way, because like it would have still been in theaters when the AIDS crisis hit front pages everywhere. I mean, like movies stayed in theaters for like a good year and a half sometimes.
Yeah, and also people were starting to hear inklings of the connection between what came to be known as AIDS and people with hemophilia, which is a bleeding disorder. So folks had an idea that blood was somehow connected to this weird disease that they were hearing about. So with the vampires and all the blood and the drinking, it all just kind of ties into that discomfort, I think, that people had at the time with this new disease that they didn't really understand.
And even though, it wasn't fully understood at the time, there was also the connection with the gay community. Because before it was called AIDS, it was called GRID, gay-related immune disorder. They thought only gays got it. They didn't even want to treat it because it was this dirty thing that these dirty people did. If you had it, you were just basically a pariah. They'd put like signs on the hospital room doors and people would just be ignored, patients.
Exactly. And there were some doctors studying it to figure out what was going on, which kind of reminds me of Susan Sarandon's doctor character as a scientist studying the weird condition related to blood that causes this rapid deterioration of the monkey that we see early on. It's a very notable scene, and ultimate death as well. So the kind of connection to medical research, trying to figure out how this weird blood disease worked.
Yeah, that's an interesting parallel, actually. Like you were saying about them withering away, like kind of like wasting away to these sort of mummies, and then Hope pointing out about how people were just basically like shut into hospital rooms and left to languish in neglect. That's really reminiscent of the way that Catherine Deneuve's character, Miriam Blaylock, would just basically, once they reached the point they were no longer comfortable to be around, then she would just stuff them in a box and leave them to languish in neglect. Say she loved them, but basically just shut them away to suffer.
I think
bleak af, but
one thing the movie does that it kind of takes that disconnect. This is all about the blood. Everything's in the blood, and the homosexuality in the movie isn't a bad thing. Whereas in real life, it was very much a big scarlet letter on you. If you got this, you were probably gay. But the gayness is kind of shown in a good light, because first it's a hetero couple who has all this.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, they definitely take a look at that swinger culture at the beginning too, and they're very clearly sort of depicted as swingers and picking up their conquests and doing this kind of thing, But the other thing,
were they swingers, or was that really just dinner?
Well, I think it's set up so that when you're watching it, it's like you think they're swingers, and then suddenly they whip out these little knives and then they start cutting on them. Like you don't necessarily know what it's about when you go in to see it unless you watch the preview or something. So you go in and you sit down and you watch this movie. They don't expect that you will assume that they're vampires. We knew it's a vampire movie because it's been around for Christ at this point almost 40 years. Then you would go see a movie without knowing anything about it. And oh shit. Oh, these people are going to get down. Oh, wait a minute. Like, I see what's going on here. these people are serial killers. Oh wait, no, they're not serial killers. They're vampires. Like they don't sell the vampire
Cannibals?
super hard.
Something?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I mentioned about serial killers earlier. I mean, this is very much in the mindset. This is very much in the minds of people at the time. Not to grab your thing and run off with it, but that's the point. People are thinking it's this. So there's a lot of overtones.
Well, Catherine Deneuve was also very well known for playing murderers who were sexy but really cold. When what else is a vampire other than sexy but also really cold at the same time?
That's a good point. Like a vampire uses sex to lure you in and then murders the living shit out of you.
Isn't that like such an old trope about women? Like if they're sexual and if they're open with their sexuality, there must be something wrong with them. There's something else under the scene. Why would she want this? Why would she be so sexy and so overt unless she has an ulterior motive? She's bisexual or she's a vampire or she's got a disease.
Well, to bring it back all the way around to what you mentioned about the LGBT community, it occurs to me that at the time, I think the people, within the subgroup within the LGBT community that suffered the most in AIDS were actually the bisexual people, because they were the ones who were like being blamed for transmitting it from the gay community, where it had been sequestered, to the quote unquote straight population. And nobody at the time was willing to acknowledge the sexuality spectrum, even though it had been published by Alfred Kinsey 30, 40 years before. Nobody wanted to acknowledge the existence.
So this was the time it went from being that dirty gay disease to being something we actually have to think about and deal with, because the quote unquote normal people are getting it now.
Exactly. "Quote unquote" normal people are getting it now, and it's all because of those traitorous bi people. And I think, like if I recall correctly, they really felt like they couldn't be visible even after HIV was no longer really a stigma. It kind of drove them underground, or at least according to people within the community who have said so about their opinions to me. I don't want to out anybody or name them, but the stigma, I feel like, at least as I understand it, lasted with bi people for a lot longer necessarily than it lasted with gay people.
Well, I still hear that from people all the time. Bi people, especially bi women, will be told, "Oh, you're just trying it out," or you're just confused, or
a phase.
or like for guys, they'll say, "Oh, you were really gay, but you're just dating women because that's what you thought you were supposed to do." I've heard so often that bi people are told they're confused, and it's got to be so frustrating to know yourself and then constantly have people just tell you, "No, you don't actually. I know better than you." But Deneuve is quite sexy in this movie, yes. To bring it back.
Yeah, to bring it back, and she has often, like, there've been a lot of speculation about whether she was bi or whether she was gay. There's been a lot of talk for a lot of years.
Gay for pay?
No, about whether or not she has never outed herself.
Well, like whether she was actually gay or rather she was only just playing gay parts. Is what I meant.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, gay for pay. Yeah.
I would say that given that Deneuve has only had a couple of marriages, or is it just one? She's been married very few times, and then there was by Hollywood standards, and then there was a long break when they didn't know who or if at all she was dating. I think the lack of information led people to speculate that, oh, maybe she's actually lesbian. That's why she's not dating men.
She has definitely had a very...
God forbid you don't want a penis. There must be something wrong with you.
Well, it's funny. She actually has had a very, I'd say scandalous, but very provocative love life. At the time when she was making The Hunger, she was 39 years old and dating a 19-year-old.
Good for her.
Yeah. It wouldn't have been, no one would have batted an eye had the gender's been reversed, especially then.
Yeah, nobody gives a damn if it's Leonardo DiCaprio. But, when...
I mean, he's only just now being called out on that, and he's, 50?
Yeah.
And Bowie went back and forth on, whether he identified as bisexual or not. I think he came out and then kind of went back in the closet, just because... It wasn't the time for him. It wasn't. It was not well received.
Yeah.
And he said in later interviews either that he either denied it or he said he regretted it. Kind of his stance on it changed over time.
Yeah, he came out in 1972, and right when there was a pretty strong backlash against the gay community as a result of HIV, he regretted publicly outing himself. Yeah, it was not an easy time to be to be a bi or a gay man in the early 80s.
It was not an easy time to be anything but a cishet white male.
Yep. If you fit the Reagan definition of what society should look like, then it was an easy time.
Default American person.
Yeah, apparently, I was just checking my facts. It says Deneuve has not had a public relationship since she broke up with her most recent guy in 1991.
Which was actually 30 years ago.
30 years
Let's all
ago.
feel old right now.
Yeah, 30 years ago. And apparently she's kissed 5 women in different films. So sometimes people think that more than just that you're a good actress.
Oh, so I mean, there's been speculation.
I mean, times have changed. If you look at like Katy Perry or Lady Gaga, they kiss 5 women in a single music video. The times they are a-changing.
They really are.
Right. Should I sit down or what?
Sorry, I just lost it.
Are we back?
Now, what am I supposed to do?
I suppose we might as well finish this miserable film. All right.
Following a bit of kinky, delicious sex with a smoking hot vampire siren, Susan Sarandon decides what would really top off the day is a dinner with her intensely boring and judgmental husband, Tom. He asks where she went for the afternoon, acting very incredulous at the idea that 2 women could hang out just talking for several hours. He's also suspicious of Sarandon's new Ankh necklace gifted to her by Miriam, wondering who gives a gift like that to someone they've only just met. This guy is both too suspicious to ignore what's going on and too dim to suspect the obvious. He should just give up at this point, but boys keep swinging.
I should be concerned if she decides to rent a U-Haul the next time she goes over to visit her.
Sarandon waves off his concerns. She's European, wink wink. Sarandon smokes yet another cigarette and pokes at a huge bloody steak. Since no one has commented on this, it is presumably the sort of thing she just has regularly. We can only assume she leaves behind a trail of destruction in the bathroom like a nervous horse. She comments that she's hungry, but it just doesn't look appetizing. I mean, she'd have to be a little peckish to order a gigantic porterhouse, I suppose, but we all know what she's hungry for, and she wants it, day in, day out. However, it's not all hungry glances and wistful sighs. The longer she is away from Miriam, the worse Susan Sarandon feels. She gets ill overnight, so she heads into work and everyone says hi. Her lab mates test her blood because why not? What's the point of having a top-of-the-range monkey battle arena and laboratory if you can't make use of the facilities? Dr. Snoop L. Jackson and co. tell her it looks like she has 2 different strains of blood fighting for dominance. They speculate that the second blood is not human, and it appears to be stronger. Finally realizing that something is up, Sarandon goes back to confront Miriam. Back at the apartment, Miriam tells her that they belong to each other, which is no way to begin a reasonable conversation, and also tells her about the hunger that she will not be able to satiate on her own. Sarandon is understandably pissed. She only consented to kinky elbow-licking sex, not full-on vampirism. She storms out and tries to call her husband from a phone booth. Kids, before cell phones, we had landlines, and if you weren't home, you had to use a public landline and just hope you didn't get herpes from the handset.
Wasn't that something about the Golga Frencham arc full of telephone sanitizers? That was the whole planet of...
and then while the arc was gone, they died from a virus contracted from a dirty telephone set. So, those useless people weren't all that useless.
Yeah, and then Saint Nokia miraculously saved us all. She can't get a hold of her husband at work, and before she has the chance to dial another number, she's spooked by 2 ruffians who want to use the phone, one of whom is Willem Dafoe. Yes, that's right. Willem Dafoe shows up out of nowhere to be a seedy street person for like 10 seconds.
Not even 10 seconds. I mean, he's in frame for I don't know how long, but it's really brief. But yeah, that's Willem Dafoe in his extra days. Not even featured extra days. They just jammed him into the frame.
To be honest, it kind of looks like he just wandered onto the shoot and they kept it in the movie. Susan Sarandon is at this point about as calm as anyone who has ever been a few inches away from a ranting Willem Dafoe can be.
You see him in the lighthouse? Boy, there's a rant.
Oh, shit. That reminds me. I need to phone my, office supplies agent about, office supplies of a general medicinal nature.
Tell you what, bug powder guy to get a goddamn email address like a normal person.
If he was a normal person, he wouldn't have ended up as a bug powder guy.
I guess I have to give him that one.
Oh, hey, yeah, it's me. I could really, really go for, some of that, maybe some of that Alabama cinnamon, man. And I'm gonna go Creamy Douglas over here and just flat out fucking raid. Shit, where did you come from? This is a private phone call.
Look into my crazy eyes. Fall before my hypno glare.
I am this close to developing the grease spasms over here. Can I help you with something?
Would you like to dance around in front of a slide projector? I have brought many slides of antique steam engines. Eh?
Oh. Is this like a bit?
You know, we could get all freaky with tiny daggers. They can really give you a nasty paper cut.
Listen, I don't know who's writing your material, and it's kind of a lot, but I kind of like it.
Is that a no?
It's not a maybe. I'm still working on that, actually. Hang on a second. Yeah, no, listen, let me call you back. It's an interesting offer, let me put it that way. Let me get back to you, huh?
Ooh, maybe if I tried it with depressing post-punk synthwave in the background. Yes.
So, I just had an interesting idea. So, this is all about vampires, and admittedly, it's not like there's any real-world myths that have to do with vampires in red neon lights in their kitchens, but there are a lot of actual mythical metaphors that show up in this movie.
Having tried only one phone number and nothing else at all, Sarandon decides she has no choice but to go back to Miriam. The hunger is overwhelming her. Since she's really tweaking out at this point, Miriam kindly puts Sarandon in her gauzy curtain bed to continue her sexy flop sweat wriggling. While she
did you say tweaking out or twinking out?
Tweaking out. Tweaking.
I mean, because she is technically a twink at this point, right?
Kind of.
How much of the budget do you think they spent on curtains?
How much did they spend on baby oil?
Sorry, you were saying about sexy flop sweat wriggling?
Well, while the wriggling is going on, Miriam goes out to procure a gigolo on whom they can feed. While Miriam is out, Tom, the husband, comes over. It was way too easy to find a stranger's address in the 80s, and tries to rescue Sarandon.
Just to confirm, yes, it's way too easy to find people in the 80s and 90s. When I was in London for the first time, I just called up the equivalent of 411 and got David Attenborough's phone number and fucking called him.
Oh, wow. What did he say?
He was pretty chill. Like, he sounded a little baffled, but at the same time, I think he recognized the fact that just some random American teenager had called him, and he wasn't mean or nasty. He just was, "Oh, thank you very much." I still feel quite humiliated that I did that.
As you should. How dare you baffle a national treasure?
Access to all European celebrities that you could think of, and you called David fucking Attenborough. That's perfect. That's so on brand for you.
Well, I kind of wanted to grow up to be him when I was a kid. Everybody else, a lot of my peers wanted to grow up to be George Lucas, but I wanted to grow up to be David Attenborough.
And so you did. Well, anyway, he doesn't know what's up, but he doesn't trust Miriam. She's way too European for his taste. He's the sort of person who makes rigid eye contact with the waiter while cheap parmesan is being twisty ground onto his pasta to make sure everyone knows how cosmopolitan he's being. Sarandon suddenly goes from being limp and disoriented to fully aware and able to fight off a man twice her size. To be honest, she has real Rosie the Riveter Butch vibe right now with her sleeveless tank and sweaty biceps, and Sarandon is rocking it. She looks like she looks like she pops the caps off beers with her thumb.
Hot.
She goes all cross-eyed and pulls out her tiny necklace dagger, trademark. The scene cuts away, but we know what's happening. In the heat of the morning, her fascination for fashion makes it hard to be a saint in the city. Okay, after that, if you're not getting the theme, just buy a Bowie album like a normal person. When Miriam returns, she leaves the gigolo unattended in a dark room and goes to get Sarandon so they can start tonight's dinner. Before she climbs the stairs, she notices the chandelier swaying. That room's a rockin', so she doesn't go a-knockin'. Instead, she stays downstairs and has some flashbacks to ancient Egypt, and presumably where she was first turned into whatever she is. A reinvigorated Sarandon comes downstairs and Miriam gives her the rundown. She will grow to love Miriam and develop Stockholm Syndrome, and they will live forever. What she leaves out is that the never-dying bit includes an eternity as a living corpse in Miriam's gauzy curtain attic under a layer of dove shit.
Yeah, eternal life does not also mean eternal youth.
Always read the small print. As the two are making out / feeding on each other, Sarandon takes out her tiny necklace dagger, trademark, and stabs herself. It's a bold strategy, to be sure. The tiny 4-centimeter knife causes a wound significant enough to absolutely coat Miriam in blood. Presumably she's gobbling it down like a chunky cousin let loose at the wedding buffet. Sarandon looks dead-ish, so Miriam carries her up to the gauzy curtained attic. She's seen it all at this point, and she knows to always have a spare coffin or two lying around just in case. She goes to add Sarandon to her coffin collection, but this time something is different. There is a whole heap of a ruckus from the casket pile. The collection of love mummies is restless. It seems that the battle of the blood going on between Miriam and Susan Sarandon has taken a major turn due to the previous bloodletting.
Collection of love mummies.
Yeah, I was proud of that bit.
Yeah, that was good.
They were only mostly
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
well.
it honestly, like, there's a big vibe of goth girl equivalent of the suburbanite kid with too many stuffed animals here, except for they happen to be mummified corpses.
Yeah,
They're
once
still
again, this movie was ahead of its time. It predicted Beanie Babies.
Is that what that rattling sound was?
Well, the whole stiff-as-a-board horde of hoarded board scores from before chases Miriam into a hallway. They back her up against a railing that she promptly falls over. She lands on the floor with a sickening thud and begins to rapidly age. Cut to black. Once you start showing your age, it's over for you in France. Discount Columbo comes back to the apartment to ask more questions about poor precocious Alice, the recipient of vile vampire on violin violence. This time, the door is answered by a real estate agent. He tells the detective that the owners moved and he was tasked with selling the place as is. Perhaps they've gone back to Europe. Oh, well, no need to investigate further. This is the 80s. Missing kids are a dime a dozen, and no one wants to call Europe to investigate potential murderers. The long-distance charges would be crazy.
Can confirm. Missing kids were a dime a dozen, so much so that they would put their pictures on the back of milk cartons.
Yes, and for Gen Z, milk was a white substance we all used to drink before liquid cocaine became a thing you vape behind the back of the 7-Eleven. We know what you're up to.
And this was milk from cows, before they figured out how to get it from almonds, soybeans, oats, what else? I don't know, peas.
More things not to
Pickles.
look up on Google image search. Cut to Sarandon in her own gauzy curtained apartment with her next victim. And behind some of those tastefully flappy drapes, there is a coffin from which we can faintly hear Miriam calling out. Payback's a bitch.
So if you notice, Miriam's coffin is behind a small chain link fence that looks almost identical to the one in the beginning that the not quite Robert Smith lookalike was dancing behind.
Oh, hey, well, there you go. You've got your head and tail matching imagery there. Well spotted. I did not spot that. That's the kind of shit I was supposed to have been trained to spot. I'm a bad student.
It's the Ouroboros just coming around, eating its own tail again.
The whole wistfully looking out over the tastefully shot city aesthetic is all very Blade Runner. It's a shame she won't die. But then again, who does?
It's a shame she won't die, but then again...
We already did that bit.
You're a minute late and a buck short, buddy.
Oh, it's no use. I'm never going to achieve eternal youth.
Oh, no. That train has left the station.
Is that what all the weirdness has been about? You need to let it go. You're old. You're just so old.
Youth is wasted on the young.
He's totally gonna die soon. Never gonna happen to my generation. We're gonna be cybernetically enhanced.
Back in your stinking hovel, you ancient he-crone.
Well, I suppose that's what I get for trying to murder everyone.
Wait, trying to what?
Maybe put a lock on the door to the back room sometime.
Mr. Guardian of the Doors.
I'll add it to the other business next time. Top of the list, promise.
Hey, I'm top of the list. Fix my damn shop.
It's still on there. It's in like the top 10 issues to discuss. Well, 10-ish.
So that was definitely a movie.
I'm not sure I get it, though.
Look, it's a simple story.
Story as old as time. Boy meets girl. Girl turns boy into a vampire. 300 years later, boy ages rapidly. Boy meets progeria researcher. Sleep-deprived monkey eats another monkey. Boy turns into a living corpse. Girl adds a boy to her collection of undead exes. Progeria researcher meets girl. Girl turns progeria researcher into a vampire. Girl promises researcher eternal life. Researcher overpowers girl. Girl's undead exes kill her. Researcher starts her own collection of undead exes.
Hey!
What?
Well, that's my bit.
Well, what's past this prologue?
Tale as evergreen now as it was in days of old. So this was Tony Scott's contribution to the sexy gothic 80s.
All right, so let's move to judgment. Ethan, what do you have to say about this movie?
To quote my friend Mara Williams, who first turned me onto this film, all vampire movies are about sex, and the very best vampire movies are about gay sex. And boy, she wasn't kidding. This movie delivers on that point in spades. It cast 3 of the sexiest people alive in 1983. Hell, 3 of the sexiest people of anything in the past 50 years or more. Unapologetic bisexuals all, and has them getting down with each other in a way hot enough to establish cinematic sex tropes for decades. Gauzy drapes blowing in the breeze. Get out the Jergens, everyone. It is time for some skin. It's also one of those rare movies which is better than the book, much better, in large part because the movie doesn't bother itself with all of the book's oddly sweaty scientific rationalizations for vampires. Speaking of the book, it really is one of these potboilers straight from the paperback shelves of Thatcher-era supermarkets. This book is a combination of late 70s neo-horror, medical science fiction, and Harlequin romance novel. It's bad, but not spectacularly bad enough to be anything more than mediocre. More than anything, the novel of The Hunger is extremely imitative of the top pop fiction authors of the era, Stephen King, Anne Rice, Danielle Steele, and Michael Crichton, all of whom are better writers because they committed to a single style. The pacing is rocky, and it has no fewer than 8 graphic sex scenes within the first 150 pages. Sex scenes appear in every chapter, sometimes multiple times per chapter, and usually take between 2 and 4 pages apiece and occur on average every 20 pages, which is to say there is a lot of fucking in this book. I suspect the author was using all the sex in an attempt to hook readers with horniness so they would hang in there for his specious speculations about a secret super race of immortal hemovorous hominids that evolved alongside Homo sapiens. And remember, this is the guy who managed to bamboozle the Western world into believing in the existence of anally probing alien abductors from outer space a few years after The Hunger came out. Ooh. As if a highly advanced extraterrestrial civilization would bother traveling all those light years to jam stuff up people's assholes. But hey, I guess it only figures that the other universal constant is the propensity of intelligent life for juvenile pranks and butt stuff, right, Zach?
God. Right.
Tony Scott was smart to cut all the intellectual and spiritual onanism for favor of the real thing. He knew people were just here for the sexy times, and boy, did he deliver. The Hunger is a fat film for the ages. But I guess that's in keeping with his style because the next film Tony Scott went on to direct was Top Gun, which is the ultimate picture in military masturbation. Top Gun is basically Reagan-era military policy jacking itself off on screen. And it's helped to remember that...
It's just a recruitment commercial drawn out.
Yes, it's a 2-hour-long Navy recruitment, actually military recruitment overall,
with
shot through the
zero plot. Oh
yes.
My God.
Yes, it's basically
I can't hate on that movie enough.
It's just F-14 porn the whole time. But it's important to remember that without Top Gun, we would never have had Michael Bay, Tony Scott's highest profile imitator, and without The Hunger, we would never have had Tony Scott in the first place. And therefore, I declare this film overwhelmingly guilty of being a source of cinemania. Next.
Okay.
All right, Zach, what do you have to say about this film?
That's Scrutiner, Zachariah. The first time I saw this film,
Yeah, I'm barely gonna remember all your names. Don't expect me to remember everyone's titles.
all right. The first time I saw this film, I think I was 8 or 9 because, it was the 80s. I had no idea what the hell was going on. The thing with the monkeys would have freaked me out a lot more if I hadn't already accidentally seen Phantasm. So this just seemed kind of incomprehensible to me. And watching it again now in my 40s, it still kind of seemed incomprehensible to me. I really don't get the point of the story other than, here's this immortal chick who's been around since Egyptian times, cursed to live forever. So she occasionally, picks up some guy who doesn't live as forever from her, but doesn't even really die. So she shoves him in a box. And we all are wondering what's in the box.
With all the other X's.
Yeah, no kidding, right? So I definitely think that this is a seminal piece of cinema in the fact that it helped spawn the whole goth movement, and especially with the little onks. That is such a goth trope. But
remember playing Gothier Than Thou with me? I still have that card game.
I do remember that. But I am going to definitely say that this is a source of Cinemania just from all the old problematic horny grandpas that pop out of the boxes at the end. So yes, this movie is guilty.
Andy, what have you to say about this film?
Well, I really wasn't expecting this film to hold up at all. I mean, everyone knows about the 80s goth thing that happens. We all had to live through it. But going back and looking at this movie, it basically invented all of that stuff. It was ahead of the game. And it will have been an amazing splash of fresh water in the face to the people watching it at the time. If you imagine these two directorial brothers, you had Ridley Scott obsessed with defining the future and asking questions about where we're going with Alien and Blade Runner, and then brother Tony Scott was obsessed with the now. He was looking at what's going on right now today in the clubs and in music and in what people are into and fascinated by, and he was defining what was going on at the moment. And in that way, this film was his way of saying, here we are in the 80s, this is what cinema's going to be. There will be doves, there will be gauzy drapes, there will be David Bowie, there will be sexy vampires licking each other, and the rest of us just had to live with that. He turned on the light switch of the 1980s in a big way, and the films that followed and drew from the hunger really show us that.
Blade Runner is the look of tomorrow, and this film is the look of tonight.
In a way, you could absolutely say that. Although
I think
by tonight, I mean
very...
yesterday, and by tomorrow, I mean technically 2016. So that was also marginally less yesterday. But the metaphor holds up. But for better or worse, this film kicked off the 80s. And for anyone who's lived through the 80s, it must be absolutely castigated for doing so and thrown into the blackest, bleakest pit we have. Definitely guilty of cinemania. Absolutely 100%.
Bravo.
Straight off the top of the head.
Well done.
Damn.
All right. Andre, what do you think of this film? What have you to say? What is your judgment?
I mean, like, for me, it was kind of like a whole different journey about, like, the existential crisis of aging itself, and very much like an exploration of our deepest, like, carnal fears and what we're not usually talking about in casual conversation about, like, hey, we're all gonna fucking die someday, dude. And, like, that was a big part of it for me, but also probably just the mindset that I approached it with. At least in this particular part of my life where I am unmedicated, I tend to take these kind of works, I wouldn't say seriously, but very much kind of on the more heavy-handed side, and that's what I definitely got from it, was exploring those fears, and then also just kind of learning about the history of the AIDS crisis, And just the fact that, we were exploring death quite a bit, and a lot of stuff people didn't want to fucking talk about, because our legislators, at least here in the United States, were literally cheering for this disease that was supposedly just wiping out the dirty gays. So definitely exploring that despair and that just falling into ruin, and nothing but hopelessness was really what I got from this piece. And it was also beautifully shot. Like, the comparisons to Blade Runner and all of that, like, the cinematography is just incredible. Like, especially I've worked on set in the lighting department, so I might be a little bit biased, but I am dying to know what the setups were like for those, because just the way that the shadows and the light were balanced was just absolutely immaculate.
For some reason, the kitchen was lit red.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only questionable lighting decision to me, but yeah, absolutely, it was beautifully and beautifully shot.
Yeah, you could also see just everything get, like, the shadows were creeping more and more as David Bowie's character got older and older and older.
I didn't notice that. Well
yeah,
spotted.
No, oh my God. Like, again, just like approaching it from a more, like, I guess, I'm trying to find the word for it, but like just a more genuine standpoint, rather than being like, haha, vampire movie. It was just, it was incredible. Like, Cinemania in the best way, really diving deep into not just Cinemania, but existential breakdown. And thusly, it is guilty as fuck.
Oh, thank you for taking that deep dive, plunging into this film as an tiny Ankh pendant dagger plunges into somebody's throat.
Nice.
Wah, wah.
And Daniel, what do you think of this film?
Listen, I haven't read the book either, but I have smelt the book, so I can tell you, it is dog shit.
And Andrea, the girl one, yeah, Andrea. What's your opinion on this movie? How do you judge it? That's what we're doing, right? We're still judging this thing?
Yeah, it is very guilty. Even though it is hard to resist the icy, sexy vampire Catherine Deneuve, I would still say it's guilty because you should never put your lovers in a box in your attic, no matter how old they get.
Yeah, I think just really as a general rule of thumb, you shouldn't put anything alive in a box in your attic.
Well, I wonder if she doesn't just see them as stuffed animals, like, as a kid who can't bear to turn loose of their stuffed animals, but they just stick them up in the attic.
I would also say that letting your small child go to a very spooky house for music lessons and not to check up on them when they don't come home, that's just bad parenting.
It was the 80s. That was typical parenting. So, are you saying it's guilty?
It is absolutely guilty.
Okay, that's everybody. So, am I supposed to judge the movie now too?
Yes, you're supposed to render your judgment as well.
All right. Well, I mean, this is a seminal vampire goth movie. It started the whole goth 80s movement. It's got David fucking Bowie, Catherine Deneuve, Susan Sarandon. How can it not be great? And it touches on so many issues that were poignant at the time. The lighting is a criminal sin in this movie. Gauzy curtains.
I have to agree with you there.
Muted daylight, and the 2 times that there's, maybe 3 times that there's light, it's either a red bulb, a blue bulb, or a screen lighting them. Like, who lives like this? I can understand Deneuve, maybe, the vampire thing, her house, she doesn't want a lot of harsh lighting. But Tom in the kitchen has fucking red lights. What, does he live at a tanning booth or something? What is up with this? So those were some artistic choices there. The rest of it kind of tracks with the 80s. So, I guess it's guilty of being very, very 80s. Personally, I love this movie. It's really a great film, but it's just so heavy-handed with all of the I'm gonna eat you and I'm dying and all of this. So of course it's guilty of cinemania. I mean, whatever cinemania actually is, I'm just trying to pick up from context clues because you guys won't fucking explain what cinemania is. Anytime anyone tries to tell me, Andy just tells them to stop. And
moving on.
Yeah, see, my point exactly. So, as much as I hate agreeing with all of you, yeah, I guess it's guilty. I'll just go with the consensus here, and I declare this conclave adjourned. Is that right? Is that what I'm supposed to say?
Yeah, that's right.
Good enough. Bang the thing.
Okay. That episode of the Cinemania Society featured Andy Slack, Ethan Ireland, Daniel Scribner, Andrea Palladino, Zachariah Burks, Andre Luke Martinez, and Hope Bravo. Written by Hope Bravo and Andy Slack. Story designed by Andy Slack. Produced by Ethan Ireland and Andy Slack. Mixed and mastered by Ethan Ireland. Graphic design by Andy Slack. Music by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Visit our website at thecinemaniasociety.podbean.com. Email us at thecinemaniasociety@gmail.com. And check out our social media feeds. We're on Twitter at TCS_Cinemania and Reddit at r/The Cinemania Society. If you liked what you heard, please rate and review wherever you found us. Mention us on social media or find us on Ko-Fi to throw us a few bones. We love to make fun stuff for folks, but it isn't free. Anything and everything helps. The Cinemania Society will be creating pieces of video media, short films and the like, so stay tuned, Cinemaniacs. The Cinemania Society is a production of the Cinemania Society, LLC.